Invest Detroit, which is the most active early stage investor in the state of Michigan. So if you're interested in startups, she's a good person to know. Before Patti joined Invest Detroit in 2014, she had over 30 years of experience in the tech sector, and she's involved in sourcing and development of early stage and high growth companies. And she currently engages in outreach activities of all sorts of kinds, like she's here right now doing outreach. And she has some great experience with other venture firms and technology firms and Fortune 500. She's a dual threat. She has a BA from Michigan State and an MBA from University of Michigan. So, you know, you gotta love her either way, I guess. I'm gonna allow Patti to introduce the topic in a little more detail and introduce her her two panelists, who I invite to come on up and take your seat, and I'll let Patti do the rest of the introductions.
All right, thank you, Paul. And please forgive me as I am stepping in. So I'm sure I won't do quite the justice that Bill's going to do today, but happy to try to fill in. So the first thing I'm going to do, though, is I'm going to change the title of this panel, because I don't think you can avoid chaos and burnout if you're in a startup. So I would say we're talking about managing chaos and burnout. That's about what only thing you can do with that. So that was a really nice intro. One of the first things Bill wanted us to do was just tell a little bit more about ourselves and why we were good to be on a panel talking about chaos. So I'll just give you a quick preview and then I'll turn it over to the other panelists. So for me, I have been in tech for 30 years. I would say my first real startup chaos experience was as part of a healthcare technology company that was scaling. They had taken on, I don't know, about $10 million in funding, and they brought on an automotive supplier CEO to be the first external CEO of the company. That caused what I call internal chaos. That was a disaster, but we managed through. My second experience was I became the CEO of my first startup when the day before my second daughter was born. I had a 17-month-old at home. And so I would call that personal urban chaos. And the third was I had a startup in the clean tech space, and things were going great. Everybody was so focused on clean tech, and oil was at like $140 a barrel, and it tanked, if y'all remember, back down to 40. And that's what I would call external chaos. So all of these different, and whether chaos is coming internally, personally, externally, along with the fact that I've invested in about 120 startups today, I've seen a lot. So lots of good stories we can share and experience to help along the way. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to David Townsend, and figure tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Great, thank you, Patti. Well, glad to be here. I'm David Townsend. Give you a little bit of my background. I'm currently president and chief operating officer at Awecomm. We're an IT services firm serving small and mid-market organizations that recognize and value the impact that technology has on their growth and scale, and how they continue to deliver services effectively to their clients, and leveraging technology and cybersecurity and all the components that go along with that. A little bit of my background. So I actually started in big tech, EDS and General Motors, and doing technical service centers around the world, and felt like, gosh, this is so big and so not having the impact I want to have. So after doing that for a number of years, I left EDS and went to Plant Moran. I'm sure a number of you are familiar with Plant Moran. At the time I joined Plant Moran, the firm was about 500 or 600 people, and recognized that scale and growth was going to be critical to their success, mergers and acquisitions, organic growth. And at the time, technology was, gosh, yeah, we all have some email, and we're thinking about getting everybody a computer, but we're not quite there yet. And recognizing that importance of technology, how this would be leveraged, we believe we need to build a technology services team for the firm. And what does that entail? What does that look like? How do we do that? So I spent 13 years doing that. When I left the firm, we were about 2,500 staff. So I obviously saw the scale and growth as we went through that transition through multiple mergers and acquisitions and organic growth. Landed at a technology firm in Rochester, Michigan, and they were 50 people and were 25 the year before. So I witnessed the chaos before I arrived. When they see that kind of 2 times growth in a very short time span, as I'm sure you all appreciate, a lot of chaos going on in that environment. Helped stabilize that, grow that firm. It was a few hundred people when I left. And again, most recently with Awecomm Technologies, been with the firm for about 6 years. When I started, we were 8 people, and we're on a quest on this new service offering around managed services and changing the way the market sees managed services and our model and unique delivery, and projected a lot of growth with that, and that's what we've seen. So we're about 6-7 times our size that we were 6 years ago. So continuing to see a lot of growth there and adjusting and adapting to that scale. So that's a little bit about kind of my background and where I've been.
Great, thank you. Mike.
Hi, my name is Mike Gruley, and my company is One Vision Advisors. I founded that company. I'm a business coach. I work with leadership teams of privately owned companies to hopefully help them manage the chaos. I love that because you never get rid of it. I grew up in a family of 6 kids and a family business. So we all worked in the business. That's how I worked through high school and college. So I had a front row seat with how businesses start, how they operate, all the good and the bad. And for some reason, I had a passion for that. Entrepreneurship is in my DNA. I've been a serial entrepreneur my whole life. I built several businesses. Some were train wrecks. Some of them were great successes. I learned from the train wrecks, and that helped me with my successes. Now I function primarily working with coaching with teams with implementing EOS, which is the entrepreneurial operating system. And I take the knowledge I have from my past and my chaos and how I try to manage it and help teams manage their chaos and get where they want to go with their businesses. So I think the most outstanding thing the overarching thing that I feel or I have for my clients is just my passion for entrepreneurship. I don't believe entrepreneurs are necessarily always made. I think it's in your DNA, it's who you are. Sometimes that's a curse, but it's hard to change. So we need to help manage that thing. And I've had many mentors and people help me along the way. And I love what I do because I get to help other people do it. So it's great to be here too. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, and it is a pleasure to be here. So thank you for making that point. So let's talk about, you know, as we said, chaos can happen at any stage in a company and it can happen for any reason. But we've all, I think, experienced their key points and stages, and whether it's revenue or employee size, that when the stresses really come out. Maybe David, we'll start with you in terms of when do you start to see those pressure points with companies or teams growing?
I think it's multiple plateaus, multiple stages as you go through that. I've always recognized it with number of people and connected the number of people engaged in the work and not so much on the revenue side of things. So, you know, I think going from 1 or 2 to 5 is a kind of a plateau, right? Even going from 1 to 2, right? When you get your first employee and making that first step. I was talking a little bit about that before we even came in here today, and that's an interesting dynamic. And then certainly that once you go behind that kind of 10 or 15, when you're getting out of the phase of everybody knows what's going on and everybody knows each other and everybody's easy to communicate with and we're all in the same place, to something where it's not that, that's another plateau. And I think it continues to scale that, and I think it's compressed more when you're smaller, and once you get to be 100 people, the next plateau is more like 200 or 250, and then maybe 300, 400, and so forth like that. But those are what I've seen in my experiences with that.
And I agree 100% with that. 5 people makes a huge difference, right? And when you really think about entrepreneurial organizations, in my experience, the real chaos comes from managing all that human energy. If you just had a bunch of machines, you just had to turn them on every day, All you have to worry about is maybe they break down and you fix them and turn them back on. But people are people, and that's the beauty of entrepreneurial businesses, that spark, that, no pun intended, that spark, that energy. So how do you manage all that to take something that's messy and turn it into something good? And that not only inspires us, but also helps this team work together and come out and inspire the world. And so as soon as you try to manage that human energy, as Dave said, heck, you get 2 or 3 people, it starts to get complicated. And geez, where I really noticed it really hardcore was, 10 or 15 already. It's just getting crazy. And of course, anything beyond that. So companies will tend to hit ceilings. And so what we need to do is learn how to break through those ceilings. And there's a way to do it. And I think, and you probably would agree with this, companies continue to hit ceilings. I don't care if they're 200 or 300 people, they hit those ceilings in a different way. They have to find ways to break through those, and they do. And that's the trick to it all. It's having some sort of way to know when it's coming and break through it.
Yeah, I agree with everything that's been said. I think the number that scares me most as an early stage investor is 50. And that's where I've seen organizations just really struggle for a lot
Did you
of
say
places.
15 or
50.
50.
50? Okay.
50, yeah. Because you're at a point, you're going fast. You don't know everybody who's coming into the organization anymore. You walk down the hall and you're like, who's that person? Right? And suddenly you have to specialize. And if you love wearing multiple hats and you love being a part of every meeting and you, like, everybody's used to being part of all the decision making, that's a point where things, like, you have to start to specialize and you have to be focused on sort of the role that you've been assigned to and allow others to be making decisions and not be involved in everything. And that transition to sort of decentralized from centralized can really be hard for folks, not just at the CEO level, but folks maybe who started with the company and didn't have a lot of experience, but were able to play in multiple roles in the organization. And suddenly now they're they were the CTO-ish, and now they're director of cloud services, and so thinking through the complexities of that hurdle, because you're also, there's the cash flow pressures, the things that happen at 50. I've just seen a lot of companies really struggle with about that number. And please feel free, as ping for questions as we go along, but if you have comments or questions that you'd love to ask the panel, we're happy to answer. It's a small group and you might as well take advantage of it.
What's Mike's trick for breaking through the ceiling?
I don't know that there's a trick to it. It's a methodology and it takes time and work. It's like anything else. It's like saying, what's the trick to getting in shape? It takes time and effort, but the point I always try to make is I, in my experience, I don't think people get into business to be in business. They get into business because they're good at something and they're passionate about it. And then one day, if they're successful, they wake up and find out they have this thing called a business. And it has all this stuff happening, all these things moving around. And if they're lucky enough to get to 50 employees, it's hell to pay. And so, that's not what they signed up for. And what Dave mentioned earlier, even at the early stages, all of these little things you got to worry about, the phones and the computers and how do they work and all the tables and the owl, and do we even have chairs to sit on? All that stuff is not what they planned on doing. And so it's all new to them. And so we have to create some kind of organizing framework so that we can manage all this stuff. As Patty said, you're not going to just make it all go away. It's always going to be coming. Manage it all so that hopefully you can get back to what you love to do again, because that's the key to that business. That's that spark that owner brings to the business. So the answer to your question is not quickly, but there is a method to do it and there's a way to do it. It's just building some muscles on all the things you need to do to break through. It's several things, actually.
So what are the warning signs? You guys go into businesses and you see so many different types of teams. What are some of the warning signs, red flags where you're like, oh, this is going to be a lot of work?
Sometimes there seems like there's a lot. And sometimes there seems like you don't see them until they're way behind you and you're like, what has been happening for the last 6 months or whatever it is. So I think they're all obviously different in every business, but the warning signs I think are, for us in the places I've been, because we've been so client driven and so focused on making sure the clients don't feel any of that management of the chaos. It's the employee frustration, right? It's the, gosh, the way we were doing this before, and now it's taking me a lot more time because we've got more work, more clients, more things, and you start to see some of the activities that are going on there that just really manual processes that you can recognize and go, how is that going to work when we're twice as big, right? And the answer always is, that is not going to work at all. And the further you get away from that kind of realization and continue doing it that way, the more chaos and frustration and red flags tend to go off as a result of that, whether that's, you know, deadlines that have to be made up for because of extra hours or, again, frustrated staff. All those type of things are pretty typical things I've seen in multiple places.
Yeah, higher turnover. Yeah.
I think Dave nailed it. Communication's where it's at. So think about the complexity. You know, you want to scale your business, but everything scales with it. So all that good stuff you did scales, and all that other stuff, that crap in there, all the communication problems, that scales too. And I'll give you, just to put it in perspective, try to imagine you had 2 people in a company. So if they're talking to each other, you have 2 lines of communication, one way and the other way, right? You add 1 more person, now you have 6 lines of communication. So that's a 50% increase in the number of people and a 200% increase in the communication complexity. Now you add a 4th person. All you've done is add 2 more people, 100% more people, 500%, 12 different lines of communication, 500% increase in complexity. That's 4 people. Now let's go to what Patty said, 50 people. I don't know what that looks like, but imagine 50 dots with arrows going. It's insanity.
I was gonna be really impressed if you did the math on that. I was thinking,
I noticed when I tried to turn that over to Patty. Patty, any numbers on that? That's that with the numbers that have little 10s next to them. So, you know, it really, you know, all the bad stuff, you know, the difficult stuff escalates and scales too. And so what we need to do is we want to scale the business and find ways to manage all that other stuff, so all the garbage doesn't escape through. And again, it goes back to human beings. It's hard to manage all that unless you have a way of doing it.
Yeah, so, you know, you've got, you know, leadership teams that are dealing with so much, right? You've got employees, you've got customers, you've got the technology platform is broken, the cloud service provider just tripled their fees. How do you help recommend or advice you would give to founders or teams to say, how do you get all of that under control?
I think the biggest aspect of that is to bring on expertise that you don't have and be willing to step back and trust those experts. And that's not always in the form of employees, right? Sometimes it's particularly hard to bring on a new employee that they're going to be a person of one running the entire accounting department or the entire HR department. And there might be a time for doing some of those types of things. But, you know, if you've gotten to the point where your operation's running and things are operating effectively and efficiently and you're investing resources there, I think that's a critical aspect of where you want to invest in internal resources on that. I'm a big fan of outsourcing, especially in that small to mid-sized market, and whether that's, you know, HR person that, you know, could be a fractional HR person or a fractional chief marketing officer or an accounting team or whatever it might be.
Office space.
Office space, great idea. Gosh, don't worry about facilities. We had a 6,000 square foot data center worrying about water leaks and generator testing and all the facility stuff that's like not what we do, and being able to move that to the cloud over the past several years has been great. So leveraging expertise even in our own business, even when it is kind of core, but to us core didn't mean management of a facility, right? And that kind of thing. So recognizing things that are core to your business and investing in those with internal resources and building a expertise and intellectual property, I think is critical, and that's where it needs to be done. For those that are outside of those areas that are not going to be differentiating your business, you got to bring in experts that can leverage that effectively. And to me, I think a lot of times that's a outsourced type of solution.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, my thoughts on that, Patty, are when you have a good organizational structure, you're able to pinpoint where you need the help, because what I have found with most organizations is, especially as they grow, they start to feel that chaos, and people say, what's that feel like? And they'll say, we don't know. It's just, there's just always something. Every day I come in, it's just, I've been there. You got a list of things you're gonna do that day, and at the end of the day, that list is still there. You've handled 47 fires, and there's 3 more things on. And you're calling home to say, I gotta work late because, I don't know, that, you know, I gotta flush, I gotta fix the toilet or something. So it's, I always tell clients, it's like that arcade game Whack-A-Mole. You're just, you know, the moles popping up, you're banging those things. And when I say, well, where's the real problem? And they say, well, I don't know, it's just a lot of stuff. You know, and they don't know because the structure isn't organized enough to where they can pinpoint it. I want, maybe this is a bad example, but think of the assembly line how to build cars. When the doors don't close, they don't just say, wow, it's a huge long assembly line, I wonder where it went wrong. They know to go at least to the door place and start there. They might have to feed back just the root of it. But what we generally find is all these things that we're working on every day, the Whack-A-Mole things, those are mostly symptoms, usually of some deeper root cause, some deeper root thing we haven't fixed. And if we fix that one thing permanently and make it go away, a lot of times 5 or 6 other things go away as well. So again, it goes back to having organizational structure, which gives you clarity. It doesn't stop the problems from happening. Like you said, prices changing and markets changing and COVID and all that other stuff. We can't stop that. But if we have the right structure, we can pinpoint it so we know what's working and what's not working, and we can address the things that aren't working as a team.
But something to add on to that, I think that's a great point, Mike. And I think part of that is also knowing who you want to be, right? What's your vision? What's your goal? What size are you going to be? So that, and not just you, but the whole organization understands that path and that where you're headed. I know for us, there's not a day that doesn't go by where we're not challenging current processes or systems or tools and saying, how is that going to work when we're twice as big as we are now? Right? And those kind of questions are coming up all the time to help identify those, not just with the core leadership team, but everybody in the organization going, oh my gosh, there's no way this is going to work. You know, 2 more clients and this completely falls apart, right? And you got to have people that are looking for those things, but that means they got to understand where the organization's going, who they're going to be, and have that framework as part of that process.
That's an excellent point, because I happen to know a lot about David and his company, and they're really good at that. Because what sometimes you get with smaller companies, I'm sure you see this, Patty, it's like, well, we don't need all that. It's just David, Patty, and me, and Patty's out. I answer the phones, and he handles the computers if I'm busy, and it all works out. And my question is, how do you scale that? How do you scale that pitching in? And, you know, or maybe we're a family business. So when we all pitch in, we're all one big happy family. That's wonderful. But if you've decided that you want to be a bigger business with 200 employees, how are you going to scale that nicely? You can't. We have to come up with some structure and assign roles and duties and things so that we can work on things as we see fit. And then ask those questions about, is this going to work? You know, when we're McDonald's, it's not. So let's build a structure now, even though it might seem a little silly. It's just 3 of us. But now as we grow, we just add the people into it and it works. We're not having to reinvent the wheel every time we have a new person.
It goes back to the early question, which is how do you break through? You have to know that you want to break through, and you have to communicate that you want to break through, right? We want to be because that 3-person family company might be like, we want to be 3 people and we want to do this for 20 years and then we're going to retire and that's it. Okay, that's a different path than we want to be 50 people and $100 million in revenue. And so you have to know that, and the whole organization has to know that. So you're all working together aligned to say, this is how we're going to do it. We got to do it together.
Do you do it in chunks of 3 or 5 years, or because what if you're switching from online to licensing or whatever? I mean, you can't do a 20-year plan.
vision,
Vision,
right?
we do. We have a long-term plan to be passionately supporting 25,000 people. We support 2,500 now, right? I can't imagine what 25,000 is gonna be like. And I don't know if that means it's in 12 years or 15 years, but that's what we talk about as our kind of long-term. If you've heard the big, hairy, audacious goal with Rockefeller Habits, the EOS system has a long-term target, all those kind of things, set that bar out there to say, this is who we're gonna be, right? And Bill Gates and Microsoft was a PC on every home, right? Now there's probably 10 in every home, right? Who could have seen that in the 1970s, right? Bill Gates, I guess.
Quick question, and actually for every member of the panel here, because you guys have both individually in your own lives and then coach people to do so. You know, it is stressful, and part of this whole topic is avoiding burnout. And a lot of what we do as entrepreneurs and founders and people that we strive for our businesses, it becomes our lives, we don't know how to detach, and burnout is inevitable. So I'm curious to know what you each individually do to avoid that burnout, and what the advice you would give to a founder or somebody that you were investing in, or somebody that you were coaching, or even like a C-level executive of your staff, because those are founders too. When you're in a new business, in a new division, you have to treat it with an entrepreneurial spirit. So please.
Great question.
Yes, that is a great question. And burnout is inevitable if you can't ruthlessly prioritize and stay focused on the vision. I want to just wrap that up. I think because when you have set a vision and everybody knows that direction, suddenly it's not just on your shoulders to have to be the leader that gets the team to that direction. If you set the vision well, then everybody's kind of empowered to help you get there. And I think it's that burden of taking everything on your own shoulders. If I were to go back to my 34-year-old self and say, what could I have done better to avoid that horrible burnout, that responsibility of, my gosh, I've got 15 employees, they all have families, and I've got to make this work in order for everybody to send their kids to college, or, you know, get food on the table, pay their mortgages. And if I were to go back, I would say, you know, you can't take all of that burden. You have to, and what I found over time as I grew was that I shared the burden with the people who were on my team and got them in part of the solution, right? I didn't have to take all of that stress onto myself. I'm a very physically active person. And so when I stopped being physically active because I was working and commuting and not spending the time, you know, on the wellness, personal wellness, that was extremely difficult. So for me, that's an absolute priority. I include that in my sort of life priorities along with my work, because I'm not a good boss. I'm not a good visionary. I can't execute if I am not taking care of myself. I'm really adamant with the folks in my portfolio and the founders that they, you know, if I see that stress and that breaking down, just to ask them to take a step back. Let's really focus on what is in your control and what's not in your control. And let's focus on what's in your control and then start to go from there. So I think it's one of the most stressful, most difficult things to be as a founder CEO, when, especially in times that are difficult.
Let me tag on. That thing you said was wonderful. She said, I'm good at this, I'm bad at this, I'm bad at this, and I know it doesn't give me energy to do these other things you mentioned, right? A lot of it's just know thyself, right? We all, especially if you're a business owner or someone starting a business, you probably have some really unique gifts, some really great skills and gifts. But along with that, you probably have all kinds of dopey things you don't know how to do, and you don't do well, and you probably hate doing them too. And I think we just heard some of the things she said she doesn't really like to do. And I think you admit that I'm not that great at it. And she's smart enough to realize through the years that when I do those things, I get burned out and I can't carry the weight of everyone. I remember something my dad told me in the business years ago. I didn't get it because I was like 11 or 12. And I said, geez, Dad, do all these people work for you? He said, no, I work for them. And I didn't get it. And then as I got older, especially when I had my own business early on, I thought, my gosh, when you have a small business, you know everybody. You know their families, you know the hurdles they have, their children, or maybe they have special needs kids, or maybe someone's going through a divorce, or someone is sick. And it's not an impersonal place. And so you feel that weight. And so you have to manage that somehow. You have to care because you do. You have to love your people. You have to love your people. But I think the key to that is just being able to let go. You've got to be able to let go of these things that you'll always feel like you have to do. Because when you started the business, I'm sure you know this, when you start the business, you're chief cook and bottle washer, doing it all. That's okay, that's just you. But at some point, you have to create the structure and say, okay, Dave, it's time for you to do this job for me, the IT part. I don't want to think about it. And Patty, it's time for you to do all that other stuff you do great, because I'm no good at it. And let go and trust them to do it. And they will. And that goes back to how do you break through the ceiling? That's how you escalate, that's how you scale and allow these people that you trust and know to do the job for you so that you can stay in your unique ability and you don't burn out.
Yeah, I think taking breaks and not being burnt out and being fresh and is super critical, and it's about prioritization. It's a little harder when you're a one-person shop and you got to manage that with clients. And what does that mean for sharing with them what you're going to be doing and why you're going to be doing it? But to great points here from Patty and Mike, as you grow, it's about trusting other people to be able to handle those things. I've always been amazed at how many times I find people that are like so excited to do tasks that and have responsibility that was like the worst thing you could ask me to do, right? I couldn't imagine wanting to do that. And it's really not being good at doing some certain things. And the people that are just, God, I'd love to do that. Love to do that. Can I have more of that? Oh my gosh, you could have it all, right?
Yeah. Accounting.
So accounting, documentation, there's so many of them. But so I think that's an aspect of it. The prioritization, I know within our organization, with my team, I make sure that they understand their need to take breaks and try to lead by example with that. The know thyself is important. I know that through the years that when I work 2 weeks straight without a day off and not having a weekend, I really start to break down, right? I also have learned that if I don't have some kind of vacation at least every 6 months, I'm going to hit that 5.5, 6 month mark, and I'm not the same leader and business owner and client advocate that I want to be at that point in time. So knowing what that looks like for me and being able to prioritize those things and get that in place has always been critical.
Do you have any, anyone really can chime in here, but any kind of practical resources or examples of these fractional type jobs for smaller companies? So I mean, you're talking about, I know this very well, all these jobs that you have, like accounting, janitorial, trash taking out, like all these things. I mean, obviously as a very small company going from like 1 to 5, those might not be sufficient to necessarily hire a full-time employee for. And so do you have any kind of thoughts on maybe resources locally or just kind of methods for, maybe it is a matter of just making the step change to growing the team to a certain size where it makes sense to bring that person on versus trying to hire someone part-time that might not be able to fill that many roles and stuff. Just kind of curious whether you have any thoughts on that or examples.
Well, so we obviously had some of us in office space, the facility kind of thing today. That's an example. I think when we got to the point where we were looking at, gosh, the bookkeeping is beyond what we want to be doing, and I don't really want to go build an accounting team. I don't want to go hire a bookkeeper and then have to hire a controller and then a CFO and all that kind of stuff. So there are a number of firms out there that do, like, they're your accounting team, right? And they provide those resources in those ways. We happen to work with Plant Moran, that is they're a client accounting service group to be able to provide those accounting services. There's a number of them out there that facilitate that same kind of method. For us, we got through the same thing with HR, right? It was like, I don't want to go hire an HR person and have that whole process of building an HR team and figuring out, okay, as we scale and grow, when do I add another HR person and then an HR manager, and figuring out how to be good at HR was not what we were going to be hitting our success on, right? So we do that through, there's organizations that are professional employment organizations like Empower HR would be a great example of that. But those kinds of services like that, where you could be like, they handle our payroll, our benefits, our HR kind of components that are a part of that. Some of those probably are more a fit when you get to be like 7 or 8, 10 people versus the 1 or 2. And sometimes the 1 or 2 might be hey, I gotta get through, good benefit administrator, and I don't need the HR kind of situation example. So those are a couple of
And
those
the
things.
HR might handle some of those legal aspects, because as
Yeah.
you know, being an employer nowadays can get very complicated with all the laws. Again, this takes you out of your sweet spot. You're in the IT world and you got to worry about all the labor laws. How can you know that? So there's a lot of different scale for these outsourcing companies too. Fractional CMOs, CFOs, integrators, HR companies, accounting, payroll. Some very large for big companies, others small that are used to serving smaller 5-10 person companies or less. So I don't think they had that out there much when I was a young man. I wish they did, because you're right. When you have 4 employees, how do you go hire someone to do your bookkeeping? You do it yourself.
Yeah, the things I'm getting at are like, even working with some of these companies, like you still have to be the person that interfaces with those companies, and kind of, even though you're not the one that is necessarily answering questions about like workers' compensation, like all these like little, law things you have to work on. Finding someone to kind of take ownership of that, so you don't even need to think about.
It's not gonna happen
people
at 5,
on pay,
right?
Say again, sorry.
It's not gonna happen at 5.
Yeah.
So you're still gonna have to think about that. My recommendation to really small startups is always have a good accountant, have a good lawyer, and have a good PEO, which is the sort of the payroll and taxes and all the things that if you don't do right, you can get yourself in trouble with the government. So, but yeah, I mean, to a certain level, you're going to be, having to buy the insurance, figure out what, work with the PEO to determine what level of healthcare insurance if you're providing it. There's just some things that you're going to have to do until you're a certain size. But fractional works if you find the right people who are a right fit with the organization, and understand that if it's not a right fit, you just have, you might have to keep trying again. But referrals, right? Like you have to use the network you have, find out people who are trusted by other people. You do the reference checking, because there are some really great people out here in the ecosystem that either they're choosing because they love a certain size of company, so they're choosing to be fractional, or they just have, it's kind of consulting. They really enjoy that. So it really can work to bridge the companies to the right size, but you got to find the right people and the right balance. Because what I always find fascinating is, even if you outsource, let's say your accounting or your books, you must know your numbers. Like, you can't advocate knowing these things. You're just getting help in sort of getting the transactional stuff done. But it's a lot, but you still have to know those things.
Yeah, I mean, like, I'm sorry.
Yeah, a great point on even great fit, right? Because great fit at 1 to 5 is probably that sole proprietor, and I have an accountant, I have an attorney, that type of thing. That might not be the right fit at 10 or 15.
Exactly.
And when you get to 10 or 15 and you're like, gosh, now I'm at 25 or 30, that might be a different fit again. And that might be some different evolutions that you go through as a part of that process with those different roles too.
And I love what you said. You're delegating this to somebody. You're not advocating it, right? So you still own it, but these are experts at doing the tasky administrative parts of it. But you're still signing the documents. You want to make sure that you've got the company that's going to take care of this for you. But you need to know your numbers. Otherwise, you're not in business.
So how do you manage when the founder or your key programmer is the source of the chaos and it drives?
Is that person in the room?
Maybe.
Yeah, go ahead, and then I'll
So
turn.
you said, well, say that question again. I just want to hear the question.
What do you do when you know, or how you approach, the left certainly with this, is when the founder or your most important programmer is the source of chaos and thrives on chaos. My sister represents that.
Just said that line.
So,
We're not his sister, are we?
Now we're getting into
one year I was part of a CEO roundtable, and that there were 15 of us, and fully 7 of us had a high, intelligent, performer that we thought was indispensable to the business, but caused chaos all over. Okay, no interpersonal skills, wouldn't share, you know, all kinds of disruptive behavior. And by the end of the year, all 7 were in the company anymore, number one. And number 2, every one of us said, oh, didn't we do that earlier?
Yep.
It's like sticking a finger in a glass, thinking they're indispensable, because that's what we thought. And guess what? The water leveled out. So sometimes you can't afford the chaos.
I don't think you can afford the chaos. It's not sustainable, probably long term. And I think it takes somebody probably unique to recognize that, especially if they're in control of what role they're going to play in the organization and how they're going to navigate that. But helping them see that and recognize that in the EOS framework, which Mike knows way more about than I ever will, is a concept of a visionary and an integrator, right? If you're familiar with that concept in the book Traction and things like that, the integrator or the visionary is more of that entrepreneurial spirit and big ideas, and it's a new idea every day, and we could do it this way and do all these kind of great things. So when I started at Awecomm, we were a technology services firm, and we had a division that sold muscle gloss flooring, and we had a division that sold beef jerky. What are we doing here, right? So having to be able to, you know, I have been able to do both. I've seen the visionary, but also being able to be an integrator and recognizing that the integrator's got to call the shots to understand and almost kind of stable and wall off the visionary and the ideas that are coming through there, with the caveat of paying attention to the really good ones, because those do come and they are really, really good ideas when they happen, and you got to recognize them and be able to empower them and bring them into the business to figure out how you're going to do that. And be able to say no to the ideas that are like, we're not going back to selling beef jerky, right?
Yeah, and they're spirited, which I think from a founder perspective, which just idea generation, they're always coming back with a new idea and a new way direction for the business. And I don't think that's bad if you can have it managed, but chaos is different. And every time where I've seen that what we thought was an indispensable person, but when they left either forcibly or on their own, how the team just was so much better off, right? Like everybody did a collective, oh my God, my goodness, right?
Yeah.
And so I would say nobody's indispensable, and some people thrive in bad chaos. And if that's negatively affecting the team, teams are too small to handle that. Not to be cold-hearted sounding, but I do believe some people with that chaotic and negativity need to be rolled out of the organization.
In your example, and I was pleased to hear that ending, because that's how it ends, right? At some point, they find their way. They either leave or they're asked to leave. Every organization has a culture, whether they realize it or not. It may not be one they attempted to set, it just is who they are. And there is no such thing as a bad culture. There's just different cultures. And I think the trap we fall into as entrepreneurs sometimes is we're hiring based on skills. So I hired David because he's the best IT guy I've ever seen. He's the best in town, right? But maybe we have a certain culture, and you were talking about this with the fraction people, but maybe he doesn't fit our culture, you know? He doesn't believe the same, he doesn't have the same core values that we have. Not to make him wrong or us right, it's just different. And so that alone, if it's like an owner, I think it sometimes can be that visionary type owner that has business ADD and there's 45 new ideas every day and they disrupt things. And it's good to have great visionaries. They're great. They're going to get you to the next level someday if you can sort through all their ideas and tap the brakes. But if it's someone else in the organization, it just might be this Mike guy who's really good in accounting, but he's upsetting to everyone else in the organization. I'm a disruptor for whatever reason. And that's, as you said, it's not sustainable. And the people will tolerate it because, well, you know, Patty's the boss and she likes this guy, so we got to deal with it. And then all of a sudden one day I'm asked to leave and everyone, like you say, goes, but you'd never do that. And everything calms down.
Well, it's a lot easier to identify the chaotic individual because of the working style, or personality, or the personal skills, right? Because those people definitely exist and I've worked with them. You know, but then there's the folks, I remember one of the companies I worked in, that was fairly successful eventually, but we came up one year with 32 key initiatives for the year, right?
Because less is more.
You know, and really sort of driven by our founder. No, there's actually 32 key things that we got to do. And this was not a bad guy. This was not a, you know, and, you know, that's some of the chaos I've sort of seen with entrepreneurs and a lot of them tend to be scientists.
Yeah, I am the worst. Like over the years, I've learned this, but you know, with my team every year, we do our strategic plan and then there are 50 things on the list. And, you know, I'm running the strategic planning for the whole organization this year. I'm like, hey, you can put as many things on the list, but we're coming it down to 5, right? There are 5 things for this strategic plan for the next 3 years. And that's all we can do because I know it doesn't work when you.
No way, Patty, this is all important. All 52 of these are important. We have to do them all.
Yeah, and you can't ruthlessly prioritize as a team. You can't focus and you can't allow people to take initiatives and run because they don't know which priority to focus on.
How do you effectively, sorry, I'm just dominating that. How do you effectively get people to buy in? It's gotta, you know,
All right, so-
people, you know,
Your expertise on BOS.
That's about team health. And so this encompasses a lot of things. Some things you said, and using your example again, you know, it comes down to a value system, first of all, right? We all share the same core values. How do we function as a team? How do we function as an organization? What are the things that are important to us? What's the filter that we run everything through before we make a decision? That's how we believe this group will work. What's our focus in our business? You know, what do we do best? We do IT. Beef jerky's fun, but we got to get rid of that because we can't focus on beef jerky and IT. That's amazing. I love to tell that story. So it goes back to a process of getting this team to be on the same page, rowing in the same direction. So when I come into the room and there's 5 of us in this leadership team, and I have 52 things I think we should do, we all get it that you can't do 52 things. How's that working out so far, right? Well, you know, we did 20 of them and we did them half-assed. All right, great. And that's why we're frustrated. And that's why we're falling apart. So eat that elephant one bite at a time. 5 things at a time, put the other stuff away and train yourself, discipline yourself to not think about it. I know, they say, oh, you can't do that. Yes, you can. Successful people do it all the time. But it is hard. As someone had a hard time with that, it's really hard. Do it. And then it becomes
And
normal.
we follow the EOS framework and it's great for a framework and a discipline around, this is what we're got to get done this year. And you create a picture of what the end of the year looks like, given these kind of core objectives, references rocks in that case. And then you break it out quarterly, right? Well, okay, that's who we're going to be at the end of this year. What does that mean for Q1 and Q2, Q3, Q4? That helps us kind of not eat out that elephant all at one time as well, right? So you got to chunk it out and that kind of thing. So having a framework around those kind of processes, I think, is really critical.
And the tough part to learn is actually recognizing what those priorities are, because, you know, to Patty's point, you know, all right, so there are 52 things that really are important. And that's true. There's 52 things and they're all important. Now here's where the work starts. And this is why I think it doesn't often get done this way, because it's hard work. It makes your head hurt. Patty says to me, Mike, you got to pare this down to 5. You got to be kidding me. All this stuff's important. Well, we got to pare it down to 5. If we have to sit in this room all day, we will. We'll pare it down. And it's got to be the most important 5. We can't just throw 5 on there and then we go back to our offices and realize, I don't know if we picked the right stuff because this other stuff's more important. So you really build that muscle of being able to prioritize, to be able to predict what the most important things are. And teams that get good at that actually find that that's very liberating. So we sit down and she says 5, and I go, all right, we can get down to those 5. That's the 5 we're going to live with. We'll take this other stuff, still stuff we need to deal with. We're going to put it away. We're not going to throw it away. That's for another time. We're going to focus on those 5. And that's where everyone's rowing in the same direction. We're all going in the same direction. So if crazy visionary comes in a room and says, what about item number 32? That's not part of this quarter. We put that one on the burner. These 5 are the most important. And that's where we're going to focus. And if they can't do that, it's going to be hard for them. So this is really about building that muscle, that discipline to be able to prioritize the most important things.
You know, where I work down with my clients quite often is when you come down and they come up with their list of 30 items, then you start talking about resources, both financial and person. And even amongst that team, all of a sudden they go, well, I already got a full plate. You know, so I guess I can't do item 25, you know. That's usually where I've got narrowed down. We see this a lot in the marketing side. You want to go up to 10 market, but you only got a budget for it too.
Do we have any more questions before we start to wrap up?
Yeah, I got one question for you, Patty. You know, we talked about how all these organizational and sort of personality issues can affect the scalability of a company. I mean, I would be curious, as an investor, how does that kind of fit, that perspective fit into you, kind of your due diligence on these smaller companies? How do you kind of evaluate that coming in from the outside?
So when I was an early young investor, I did think technology could overcome anything. And now I do firmly believe it is the team. And I was told that when I was young, but I had to learn that for myself. So it significantly impacts, right? When we do diligence on the team, we're looking for how is this team interacting in the meeting? When we made a request for diligence items, how responsive is the team? Have they thought ahead about what we're going to be asking for, or how, you know, are they asking questions of us? The team dysfunction is extremely easy to see in meetings. And again, because team is at the top of the list of things that we're looking at, if we see dysfunction, I've got another 20 companies who are knocking on my door. As much, even if I love what is happening, I'll probably say, hey, it seems like you've got a couple of these challenges right here. Why don't you come back in 6 months? Because I'm going to prioritize the teams that do have it together, are functionally operating. Because there will be incidents, there will always be crises, but there doesn't need to be mad chaos. And so because we know this is a roller coaster, I need to see teams that, it's an overused word, but resilience is important, right? Can they get through a crisis and manage and be functional? And because another crisis is going to happen at some point. So watching that and seeing how teams behave, absolutely essential. And I have turned down investments where we thought were great opportunities, but the team just was too dysfunctional or had some elements of chaos that we did not want to take on as investors. All right, so parting advice to this crew. Been so kind to be here tonight.
Well, I guess I can start. I don't have one thing. I think there's a lot of things, but a lot of things maybe we've hit on today. Culture is a huge part of it, but I think understanding who you are today as an organization and who you want to be tomorrow is critical around setting that vision in that direction. And then I think from there, I think recognizing what you need to be really good at and have specialization in and capability in as an organization that becomes your secret sauce, your differentiation, your ability to deliver and differentiate yourself in the marketplace is critical to recognize what are those components and recognize what are not those components, right? Like you could spend a lot of time trying to build an organization to go, okay, we got to get really good at HR stuff, and we got to figure out this accounting thing, we got to figure out IT, and we got to figure out marketing and all those kind of components, and you're just not going to be able to get your arms all around that at once. There might be times when you start to say, hey, I think we do this HR thing in-house better than what we could do otherwise, or accounting, or whatever it might be. But recognizing that and recognizing you're going to get some outside expertise that's going to help you with that, and it'll be different as you grow and change as you go along. That'd be some of the things I would be thinking about.
And I'm gonna tag on to something he said earlier about knowing where you're going, what you're doing. Build a foundation for your organization. Figure out how big your house is going to be and create the foundation that's going to be proper for that house. Otherwise, what you'll be doing, and this happens often, I'm sure you've seen this, Patty, you've got this big house and it's got this little chintzy foundation underneath it because we just didn't think ahead. And now we have to dig out from underneath this house. Investors aren't going to want to do that, I would imagine. They're going to say, why don't you fix that and come back and see us? You got to dig that foundation out and put it in there. So think about what you want to be, at least at some level, not 20 years down the road, but maybe 3 years down the road, and put that foundation in place. And then the other part of it I would say is, I'm going to use a Patrick Lencioni line, but know the difference between healthy and smart. You have to have both. Most people hire smart people, skills, and that's great. But I would take a healthy team any day over talented people. And I don't know if you're hockey fans, but if you remember the 80 Olympics when we beat the Russians, you say, we had no business beating them. We did not have the talent. But that coach put together people that believed they could win, and they had heart, and they were on the same page, and they had each other's backs. I know that sounds very kumbaya-ish. If someone told me that when I was in my 20s, I would have said, what a bunch of BS. I'm 60, I've been 35 years in business. That's the ticket. And you just said this, Patty. Healthy team, the skills will take care of themselves, they'll grow together, and they'll build this beautiful place on this foundation of themselves.
And your team is more than just the people who are there that you're paying, right? Or that are as a founder. What most companies don't take advantage of is all the people around them that can help them through different events, or even as they grow. That putting together advisors, and those advisors will shift as a company grows, but you don't need to know it all. You don't have to have all the answers. You don't have to find all the answers. You don't have to have everybody on the team having to have all the answers. But there are so many people that help, and NEF is such a great example of that. All these people who are, giving back to the startups in the community to say, hey, I've gone through this. And just sitting in this room here, there are people who experienced it. There's no need to recreate the wheel here, right? There's so many things that happen with startups happen again and again and again and again. So work with the people who've seen it again and again and again and save yourself. Right, so get those advisors, shift them out as you need different skills or different, places of where the company is growing, but leverage that. Advisors can be so powerful, and they're an extension of your organization, especially when teams are small. All right, so thank you, everyone.